In UC Gundam, Newtypes are an odd beast to address. In the original Mobile Suit Gundam, the idea kinda comes out of nowhere because Tomino wanted to explore a few concepts which the more realistic setting, and his slashed episode count, would make rather difficult to tackle. In Zeta, said idea is properly fleshed out and hits well, with new aspects thrown into the mix. Double Zeta doesn't reinvent the wheel in this regard, and is generally not the best, but when it comes to Newtypes, it doesn't offend much. Char's counterattack, however, drives the overarching theme of the concept home with a moment fans of the franchise, and those in the setting itself, hold in high regard. It's treated with importance, albeit not always in the best way. Having said that, modern UC and its take on Newtypes is bizarre, to say the least. For the longest time, there was something about it which I didn't like, yet I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Then I read this interview from Yoshikazu Yasuhiko, I probably butchered that name, I apologize, Mobile Suit Gundam's animation director, which states, "It's only a story about the small people who get involved in a war. However, the element of new type became more important in the following series after that. Human innovation equals new type will change the world. More and more otaku and critics who misunderstand that was the theme of Gundam started appearing. In fact, some of the sequels were produced to be interpreted that way. However, that is elitism." Being frank, I feel as if Yasuhiko's sentiments match mine almost exactly. The core ideas behind Newtypes remain, but the message as a whole has been warped into something different. Simply put, Newtypes as a concept are meant as a warning to why peaceful understanding, mutual cooperation, is so important. It's a cheat that makes relationships between those that just met extremely powerful, highlight the tragedy of killing those you know, give a face to the faceless. Newtypes are people, complicated and flawed like the rest of us, who can understand how others are feeling at a glance. Yet, in spite of that fact, despite knowing the harm and misery they'll inflict upon others, some still choose to fight, impose their will by force. As witnessed with Shirako, Haman, and eventually Char, Newtypes alone aren't the solution to humanity's problems. In fact, they can perpetuate them just like ordinary people. Unicorn, and to both a lesser as well as greater extent NT, place enormous emphasis on Newtypes being the future of mankind, that they'll lead the species into a new age. Though this idea isn't unique to those two series, with Char going on about it quite often in Zeta, there's usually been a level of irony to it. Like I stated previously, though Char may genuinely believe in what he's saying, his beliefs are profoundly contradicted by what's happening on screen come the series finale. By the end of Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta, and Double Zeta, the protagonists, the Newtypes we've been following, are so goddamn burnt out due to the nature of their powers that they just want to be left alone. They don't want to kill, to fight, because they've come to realize it's pointless. Any larger concept of what it means to be a Newtype is lost on them because it doesn't matter. Their powers, though they can act as a warning, can't bring about an end to war, and they'd be arrogant to believe otherwise. This isn't to say they're powerless, but rather that they're just one part of a larger whole, a solution all of us, ordinary people, should strive to work toward. Unicorn and NT do a lot of things right, do not get me wrong, and are actually fun to watch. Well, most of the time. However, their portrayal of Newtypes, put bluntly, miss the point. When the power of God and the ability to warp time are being thrown around, something has gone terribly wrong. It lends credence to the argument that Newtypes glorify war, instead of embodying the exact opposite. Now, up until this point, I've been talking about UC and UC alone, however that's about to change. After War Gundam X has Newtypes, and is, more or less, the concluding paragraph to the Universal Centuries research paper, so to speak. It encapsulates the point which was being made, and breaks it down in a concise manner. Let's start with the glorification of war, since that's a big one. Like I said previously, Unicorn and NT lend credence to this argument. However, they do not support it entirely. Plainly and clearly, do these two entries show off how miserable war is, be it Benager with Zinnerman, Marita's entire character, or what happened to Rita. It's clear as day where these entries stand. War is awful. Bearing that in mind, this idea is undercut by the nature of the story. The unicorns and Neo-Zeong, weapons of war, have abilities which fall into a technological singularity when paired with a new type. They can and will, if left unchecked, change mankind forever. Contrary to the message of early UC, the weapons are awe-inspiring instead of horrific. Implies that evolution and innovation, the acts of a few, will bring about an end to war as opposed to the cooperation and understanding of the many. In Unicorn and NT, it isn't so much that the technology is bad when it's in the right hands, in fact it can do a lot of good, but rather when it's in the wrong ones. After War X stands in stark contrast to modern UC, and shows how horrific, as well as dangerous, such a mindset is. The show's antagonists believe new types are nothing more than weapons, a means to an end, a way of achieving a greater good. It's asserted time and again that war gives birth to new types, that they are the heralds of the coming age. Importance is placed upon them, and on the surface, it's made to appear as if they glorify war. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. Unlike Unicorn and Narrative, weapons associated with new types are some of, if not the single most horrific and inhumane things in the entire setting. The Flash system, as well as its implementation, nearly broke Jamil and almost brought about the extinction of mankind. Karis, a cyber new type, has to live with excruciating pain for the rest of his life, and without any say, was used as a battery for a giant mobile armor which killed countless innocent people, whereas the L system stripped a young woman of her individuality, her humanity, and turned her into a shell of her former self. These weapons are evil, and remain so even when employed by those who are trying to do the right thing, which is why, time and again, they're destroyed upon discovery. In X, human evolution and innovation sees individuals, new types, get stripped of their humanity. It flips the possibly unintended implication of Unicorn and Narrative on its head, demonstrates how flawed that line of thinking is. New types serve not only to highlight the importance of understanding and cooperation, but also reflect the horrors of war. During periods of conflict, people aren't always people. Sometimes they're tools, statistics. As ironic as it sounds, new types are turned into the faceless, as opposed to giving others a face. Early UC touches on this idea quite a bit, be it with the cyber new types in Zeta, which are literally treated as weapons, or how the term new type starts to become synonymous with ace. X's premise really drives that point home, since Jamil wants to find and protect those like him so they don't get exploited. The villains, be it the Second Federation, the Revolution Remnants, and a whole host of others, well, they want to do precisely the opposite. New types, to the audience, are meant to be important for what they represent. In the universe itself, however, they're not supposed to be special, at least entirely, and that's the tragedy of their existence. They can only thrive and live fulfilling lives in a world without conflict. However, those with agendas of their own prevent this from coming into being. Their existence, in a way, perpetuates war because people keep fighting over it. New types have always been different from ordinary people, with their own advantages and disadvantages, but they were precisely that. Different. Regular folk can do things they can't, and vice versa. Sure, new types can sense others' emotions, but ordinary people don't have to deal with the baggage that comes with that. There were trade-offs. No one type was the be-all, end-all. At the end of the day, the difference didn't matter. People were still people, which is X's entire point, and what separates it, as well as early UC, from modern UC. To understand what I'm trying to get at with this final bit here, we need to take a look at the endings for both After War X and Unicorn, since it's downright frightening how similar these two are in their last moments, while also having completely different messages. For those that care, spoilers inbound. The battle for Laplace's box and dome have the same setup. Two factions are working against each other to reach something whose contents will, supposedly, change the future. All the while, the protagonists race towards the same destination. Upon reaching said destination, there are some major reveals as well as a clash of ideals that sees the protagonists victorious. What ultimately sets these two series apart, however, is the contents everyone was working toward and the nature of the reveals. In Unicorn, Laplace's box is a part of the original Federation Charter, which states that if a new race of humans appears in space, they'll be given representation in the government. Basically, if new types start appearing, things have to change. In After War X, however, Dome is the first new type of the setting who was trapped and weaponized long ago. He ends up stating, or rather, revealing, that new types don't exist, at least figuratively speaking. In the setting, everyone has a different definition for what a new type is. It's a catch-all term, something NT works into its plot that has no set meaning. Essentially, he reveals the distinction between new types and ordinary people is meaningless. It doesn't matter. If those alive in the afterwar era want a better future, they all have to work together. They need to throw aside old labels and treat each other as they are. People. I enjoy Unicorn, however, I've always found its ending to be a mess. For a long time, I couldn't explain why, but I think that's finally changed. Banagher and Minerva's entire stance come the end of the series is that people need to let go of past hatreds and just move on. That the wars of yesterday are corrupting today, and that needs to change. Things cannot continue as they are, because if they do, humanity is doomed. The cast of X takes away something similar, however, there's a key difference: the framing of new types. With Minerva revealing Laplace's box to the world at large, Unicorn implies that the change which needs to be made is in relation to new types, that the charter should be followed, the distinction between new types and old types be made official as to make them a part of the government. Evolution, achieving an ability to understand that is otherwise impossible, will correct the path humanity has found itself on. Both series explain that abandoning past transgressions is important, as is achieving an understanding. However, the emphasis on how to do so couldn't be more different. In Unicorn, the distinction of what a new type is matters. In X, it doesn't. Unicorn accidentally embraces labels, divides, instead of throwing them aside. And NT, with its crazy power of God, technological singularity stuff, only emphasizes this point. What modern UC has forgotten, what X and early UC still hold on to, is that Gundam is a story about people. That we shouldn't strive to be what we aren't, and instead be the best we can possibly be. New types are important to us as an audience for what they represent and warn against. In the setting itself, they're different, sure, but still people at their core. They aren't this be-all end-all, at least they shouldn't be. If humanity as a whole is to see a better future, we all need to work together, cast aside old hatreds, labels, and see each other for what we are. People. But with that said, guys, I've been Bufar191. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I want to state, I really like how NT explains what exactly new types are, which I actually made a video on if you can ever find it. But there's still something about it, which that interview that I read, that came at the perfect time, because it came right as I was watching X, and a lot of things clicked. NT and Unicorn have always bugged me, and I finally figured out why. But regardless, yeah. Tell me what you guys think. I'm curious, because everyone seems to have different definitions and ideas for what a new type is in our world as well, which I kind of find fitting. And I'm just curious what you guys think. With that said, I've been Boo. See you all next time. Goodbye.